Looking to make money passively while you're out there grinding for real money, or while you're already AFK fishing or training? Welcome back to the channel all about life skilling in Black Desert. My name's Teddy, and because the Royal Workshops have been out for over a month, today I'll be showing you how I have my worker empire supplying materials to the Royal Workshops, so I only have to feed the workers while gathering or mob grinding. For those who really enjoyed the trade crates or just making money while not doing anything, this one's for you. So if you find this helpful, be sure to let me know and check out the channel for more Black Desert content. But with all of that out of the way, let's just jump into making the perfect Royal Workshop without using any silver in Black Desert Online. Before starting the list, of course, all the materials can be bought off the central market, and making your perfect Royal Workshops can be done at any time with any contribution. This is just to show you all of the Royal Workshop materials that can be gathered using workers manually gathering, or just by using alchemy. So because most of the trade goods require certain materials like rough crystals, let's take a look at all of the rough crystal nodes. Taking the southern swamp node here next to Glish has rough mud crystals workers can gather and will cost 2 contribution points total. The Goblin Cave here between Velia and Heidel is one place to get the rough translucent crystals, costing a total of 3 contribution points total. Both Dokkaebi Forest nodes have rough translucent crystals costing 3 contribution points. Myeongyang Hall here in Seoul has more, costing 2 contribution points. And lastly, we have Mount Ashi, which will cost another 2 contribution points. Rough red crystals are another node to go for, with these being a little harder to get, being able to be gathered from the Kurudo Cave here. This will cost 2 contribution points, and the only other place is over here at the Ancient Fissure node, which will cost a total of 4 contribution points total. As for the rough black crystals, these can be gathered from Gavana Volcano node over here next to Valencia, and will cost 5 contribution points total. More can be found at Matgol Village south here of Bukpo in the Land of the Morning Light and will cost 2 contribution. One of the easiest nodes for the black crystals is here in the Abandoned Iron Mine in Medea, costing 3 contribution points for the node and the rough black crystal subnode. Another node like the Crescent Mountain is another great spot for the black crystals with 2 nodes supplying them. This, however, will cost 5 contribution points for the complete node. Pilgrim's Haven also has rough black crystal node for a total of 4 contribution points. And the last node to take a look at here is Basham Base. There's only one node here, costing 2 contribution each, but like all the desert nodes, it can be a little harder to get to. Rough green crystals needed can only be gathered from the Rodham outstation here next to Calpheon. Luckily, it will only cost 2 contribution points. As for the rough blue crystals, these can only be found back here at Gavana Volcano for another 5 contribution. Finally, we have the rough purple crystals. Crescent Shrine is a little out of the way, but costs 1 contribution for the node and 3 for the subnode. The Volcano Zone will cost 3 contribution for the node and 2 for the Titanium node. Finally, we have the Gavina Great Center for 2 contribution and another 2 for the subnode. Some goods will require fabrics like cotton and silk, so starting with the cotton, we have the best node to take being needed to connect Serendia and Medea region, the Alto Farm. This will cost a total of 4 contribution, but the node itself connects the region, so it should just be an extra 2 contribution. The only other spot for cotton is the Castle Farm here next to Tariff, but will cost a total of 4 contribution points. Silk can only be found here at Airedale Farm in Valencia. This will run you about 3 contribution points for the node and the subnode. Other goods demand materials like grain, so the biggest grain you'll need will be rice. Rice can be obtained from 2 nodes, Nopse Butte County here in the Land of the Morning Light, which will cost 1 contribution, and here in Godu Village, which has 2 rice subnodes, which will cost another 2 contribution points. Barley can be obtained here at the Northern Wheat Plantation near Calpheon for 3 contribution points total, over here at the Duvenkroon Farmland for another 2 contribution, and lastly, Merrick Farm north of Duvenkroon for another 3 contribution points. For other trade goods that require powders, don't worry, I have that covered too. Powders of Flame can be easily found here at the Coastal Cave node for 1 contribution and another 1 for the Copper subnode. Gavina Volcano has powders, but will run you 3 contribution for the node and 2 for the Titanium subnode. Medea Shore is another popular spot, costing 1 for the node and 3 contribution for the rough opal subnode needed. Bayujin Canyon here in Medea will cost 3 contribution for the node and another 3 for the subnode needed. Budia has more Powder of Flame, which will cost 1 contribution for the node and 3 for the opal subnode. Lastly, we have Gyeogui Cave here in Seoul for 1 contribution for the main node and 1 for the copper subnode. Powder of Time can be gathered using workers from the Glish Swamp node here next to Glish for another 1 contribution and 1 for the lead subnode containing the Powder of Time. Quaint Hill has a node for 1 contribution and another for the lead subnode which has more Powder of Time. Omar Lava Cave is a little more expensive, coming in at 2 for the node and 3 contribution for the zinc subnode. Durong Cave and Dang Forest in Seoul will all cost 1 contribution for the main nodes and 1 contribution for the subnode. Next, we have the Powder Rifts. A couple places have easy powder like Kepler Quarry here above Kepler for 1 contribution and another 1 for the coal subnode. Omar Lava Cave here in Medea for 2 contribution for the node and 3 for the coal subnode. Another spot is the Primal Giant Post south of Kepler, which has Powder Rift too, but it requires 1 contribution for the node and 1 for the lead subnode. The last place to mention is going to be the Gvanya Volcano, costing 3 for the node and another 2 for the Vanadium ore subnode. Powders of Earth can be found here in Bear River Head south of Calpheon. It'll cost 1 contribution for the node and another 1 for the subnode needed. Or Lake Flondor here in Comso for 3 contribution for the node and another 2 for the subnode. Lastly, we have the Powder of Darkness, which is one of the easiest powders to get using workers, with the Coastal Cave next to Velia here having some on the subnode. Both the node and the subnode will cost 1 contribution each. Same with the Coastal Cliff here, costing 1 for the main node and 1 for the iron subnode. Northern Hydo Quarry for another contribution and the iron subnode for 1. Hexstone Wall south of Kepler will also cost 1 contribution for the node and 1 for the subnode. The Abandoned Iron Mine node here will cost 2 contribution for the node and another 1 for the iron subnode. Ashram Base has easy powder costing 1 for the node and another 1 for the subnode. The Crescent Mountain is a little out of the way and costly to get, but it does cost 3 contribution for the node and has 2 subnodes costing 1 contribution each. Gavana Coastal Cliff, costing 1 contribution for the node and 2 for the Vanadium subnode, also has powder. And lastly, we have Matgol Village here in Seoul, costing 1 contribution for both the main and subnode. Now, these are just some examples of where to send your workers to gather the materials you need throughout the week while doing other activities. I'm sure there are more nodes around the map, so let me know down in the comments below. I'm always curious on where I managed to miss things, or if there are other materials that have better contribution costs. But we can't mention using workers for free materials without at least talking about the other ways to get them and not having to use a central market like gathering. Gathering is a great way to make billions of silver on the side while looking for the materials used in the royal workshops. From selling extra materials to enhancing gear, manually gathering is perfect for any life skiller looking to save extra money. So, starting off with the rough crystals, let's go down the locations. There's only one place to gather rough translucent crystals, being here in the Goblin Cave in Balanos. Running inside the cave has crystals all along the sides of the cave wall, and will need channel changes to get a large amount of the crystals. New players sometimes run in here, which will slow down your rotations, and even though it's not in a safe zone, higher players usually don't come down here, so it can be a little bit safer. Rough mud crystals can only be attained around Glish ruins here, all around the outside. And down the road here are brown rocks with light crystals embedded in them. These mud quartz have slower respawn times, so getting a ton will require a lot of channel changing. And with this being a more popular area, there will be more people running around, and it's not uncommon to run into someone else's rotation. Rough red crystals are found here in the Crudo Cave in the Calpheon region. Like the translucent crystals, these can be found alongside the cave walls heading down into the cave. The mobs here can attack you on a lower level, so make sure you have a higher level tune and be prepared to change channels to speed up how many crystals you can get. Next are the rough green crystals. There are 3 spots, starting with the Rodham Outstation here in the Calpheon region. Dotted all around the area near the main road and the mountainside are the green quartz needed for the rough green crystals, but be aware this is a mob grinding zone, so you might have a shot at being murdered. Next spot is Basilic Den here, another mob grinding zone in the Valencia region. This area is a little dodgy, being in another mob grinding area, and unfortunately there are less quartz here, but offers a way to manually gather them. Lastly, a few green quartz can be found here in Hysteria, out in the Valencia region. This might be the worst place to try to gather the quartz, being the most popular mob grinding area, and it only has 6 quartz. Moving on to the rough black crystals, we have more places for these. First stop on the list is going to be the abandoned iron mine here in the Medea region. Scattered around the whole area are the black quartz containing the rough black crystals. There are a lot of mobs here, so be prepared for any of them to smack you if you are a lower level. Next, we have the desert nagas. There are slightly less quartz scattered around here and is a mob area. Iluku jail has a few less black quartz to gather, but still has some. And finally, even less quartz can be found scattered around the Rod Sulfur mine. All of these areas have monsters that will attack you and players that can kill you, so be careful when out there. Onto the blue crystals, we have 2 places. The main stop is here at Gajas in the Valencia region. This area has the most quartz you can gather, but is in another mob grinding area that is very popular with players, so be careful while you're gathering out here. The other place is out here in Hysteria, but it only has 8 quartz, higher hitting mobs, and more players running around willing to kill you. The last rough crystal on the list is the violet crystals, which has an easier time to gather. First place to gather these is from the Crescent Shrine here in the Valencia region. Scattered around in huge amounts around the rocks, these purple quartz can be found just with a ton of mobs around and red players, so be careful. Not to mention, the desert sickness can hit you, so come prepared. Next area is inside the Rod Sulfur mine along the walls, but this does have less amount and a lot of angry mobs or players running around. Last place is Hysteria, but again, much like the last crystals, I'd avoid here. Now let's talk about all of the fabrics. Cotton is by far the easiest to find and gather, having huge areas. The first area and the biggest is the Hex Sanctuary here in the Calpheon region. From Bear all the way down to the Witch's Chapel, all around has cotton that can be gathered, and because there's so much cotton, it won't require any channel changes. Next, we have Castle Farm here in the Medea region, having the most concentrated amount of cotton in the game. Alto Farm north of Castle has 3 smaller condensed patches of cotton. Shuri Farm here in Medea also has a smaller single patch. Finally, here in the Bazaar Farmlands, we have 2 huge fields of cotton. As for the silk, silk can only be gathered from the mulberries found here in the Erdel farm found in Valencia. There's a low chance to get the silkworm cocoons, but there's still a chance. All the fabrics can be found from gathering the laundry lines out here in Bear too. Grains are the easiest to gather, having so many different places. So, with the rice, one of the best places to gather rice is going to be Napse Biot County here in the Land of the Morning Light. Out here is a sea of rice, so you won't have to change channels. The last place to get the rice is here in Godu Village in Seoul. This spot is closer to Yukjo Street for those needing closer storage with a decent amount of rice to gather. For barley, there's way too many places to gather barley, so starting out, Calpheon has a larger amount of barley to gather with 2 huge plots here in the northern wheat plantation here. Dragon has a nice amount of barley too in the Bloodwolf settlement here. But by far, one of the regions with the most barley is going to be Odalita. The Crypt of Resting Thoughts here has a ton of barley all the way up to the Forgotten Mountains. And finally, down here into the Odalita Castle has a lot more barley. Barley can also be farmed at a fence too, if you want to use farming or just have the seeds for it. The last material we can gather is coal. Because there's way too many places for coal just scattered around the whole entire world, including all of the Balanos Islands, I'll just list a couple personal favorites of mine. First being the Omar Lava Cave here in Medea. This has one of the largest amounts of coal in the game scattered around, but there are mobs here. The Keplen Hill here also has a nice amount scattered around the rocks. And finally over here at the Ozo Pass in Calpheon has more scattered around. While most of the powders can be gathered from mining, that's still extremely slow. Using alchemy, however, can speed up how fast you can get each powder. This does require a high investment into alchemy for the tools, house, materials, and the gear, but with enough time, alchemy is by far one of the fastest and cheapest ways to get all of the powders. Simply choosing any recipe has the ability to proc the mysterious catalyst alchemy byproduct. And these can be exchanged for 200 of each powder of your choosing. Even though any recipe can be used, I suggest using the easiest ones like the pure liquid or powder reagents. any of the bloods with just how easy the materials are to get for them, then whatever other recipe that you choose to try to use for the Imperial turn-ins or just trying to make money. The goal here is just to get a lot of the mysterious catalyst byproduct to turn in for the powders. The easier recipe you choose, the more chances of getting byproducts with having a lot more materials, and if you choose the right recipe, you can have all of your workers gathering the materials so that all you have to do is choose the recipe and make it. The Royal Workshops are a great addition to anyone's worker empire, being able to print out more silver than the trade creates passively with a lot more materials not costing money, and others able to be gathered manually or by using workers alone. But it's no denying how much time and contribution is needed to get the workshops running almost self-sufficient. For those who take the time out to get these running, making billions can be done alongside your crates for even more money every single week. I hope this helps you start making your very own perfect Royal Workshop so you can start making even more passive money throughout the week. Remember, none of these nodes are required, and all the royal goods can be made without a worker empire. This is just to help you get those royal workshops running with just needing to feed the workers. But with all of that out of the way, I'll have more fishing spotlights as I get to each area, and in the meantime, good luck getting those red and yellow foods from the royal workshops. I'll see you guys in the next one. Keep gathering out there, everyone.